Hi, everyone. My name is Adria Focht. I'm the president and CEO of the Charlotte Museum of History. Thank you for joining us today as we continue to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Week in partnership with the Catawba Nation and the USC Lancaster Native American Studies Center. The Charlotte Museum of History's mission is to save and share Charlotte's history. The Catawba people have been in this area for millennia. So to tell the story of this region and understand how we got here today, we begin with the Catawba Nation and other Indigenous peoples in North Carolina. And that's a story that continues to this day. We have been thrilled to offer this week's cultural and history lessons from the people who know it best, the descendants of some of these first residents. In today's Lunch and Learn, we'll learn about tradition and innovation in Catawba pottery. Pottery making has been an integral part of Catawba identity for more than 4,000 years. The tradition has been passed down within the nation and has survived contact with Europeans, wars, centuries of economic, cultural stresses, and the introduction of modern technologies such as the potter's wheel. The Catawba pottery tradition has persisted and remains one of the oldest and purest art forms of its kind. Today, we are joined by the Chief of the Catawba Nation, Chief Bill Harris, and his student, Elizabeth Harris, who will give us a live demonstration of this historic art form and its modern innovations. Chief Bill Harris is the elected leader of the Catawba Nation and has held this position for over 9 years. Under his leadership, the nation has made great progress towards economic development, improved governmental structure, educational programs, and mental health and substance abuse programs for citizens, and much more. Chief Harris's love is Catawba pottery. He's a master potter and received the South Carolina Arts Commission's Dean Laney Harris Folk Heritage Award for his work in 2016. Elizabeth Harris is the executive director at the Catawba Nation. She has worked for the nation for over 12 years in various positions, with 3 years in her current role. In this role, she works closely with the elected leadership to carry out the goals of the nation through its governmental departments. She oversees a staff of 95 employees. Elizabeth has been learning Catawba pottery from Chief Harris for about 1.5 years. We invite those of you who are watching live to ask questions in the Q&A. And we hear from these two that one of the questions they are most commonly asked is, are they related? And Harris is one of the most common surnames in the Catawba Nation, and Chief Bill Harris and Elizabeth Harris do share a last name because they share a distantly related common ancestor about 6 generations. So, you please do ask your questions, but we hope we stemmed that one. Welcome, Chief Harris and Elizabeth Harris. We are absolutely honored to have you here and excited for your presentation today.
Thank you. We're excited to be here today too.
It is an honor to actually to be asked to participate this way with the Charlotte Museum. So I know that we have a long history with you guys, and I hope that when I'm out of office, there will still be that long history. So, but going back to something that Adria said,
thank you so much. We couldn't tell this story without you.
Actually, you can, and a lot of people have. But thank you for actually coming to the source.
Yes.
Adria said something earlier, and I'd like for us to go back to that, and that is, this is Q&A. I can sit here and talk about Catawba pottery and tell you, my history, my experience, but the question that you have in your head, I can't pull out. So the question you'll have to get it out of your head so that I can possibly have a chance of answering. And if I can't answer it, Elizabeth can.
Or we will try.
Or we'll find an answer. Yes. So, do we have a question before I start? Okay. So, let's talk about Catawba pottery, and I'm going to make it personal, what Catawba pottery means to me. I was very, very fortunate to be born the grandson of Georgia Harris, who was the granddaughter of Martha Jane Harris. And with that, I had a wonderful tie to this indigenous art form that was instilled in me as a young man, but I did not do anything with that knowledge until I was in my late 40s, early 50s. But I remember sitting with my grandmother and making pottery and hearing her tell the stories. We went on clay digs, which is an experience unto itself. When you stand out in the middle of that field and feel the energy that comes from your ancestors coming to that same spot, generation after generation, and finding that vein of clay that is going to create this wonderful art, which started out as, utilitarian. Through 4,000 years and contact with Europeans, the art form changed. But for me, it was always about keeping the forms and then expounding on that. And I think that's true in any artist. I don't do reproductions. I need to make a disclaimer at this point in time. I'm sure I made it earlier. I am not a historian, so do not walk away from this thinking, well, the historian for the Catawba Nation said such and such. No, the historian for the Catawba Nation is not me. So if you hear from the historian, let me know. But that I am not that person. So I sit here before you and I look at Catawba pottery, and what it means to me is it is an art form that has survived European influence. And the influence is here with us today as you look at this. Prime example is, well, I'll go with Elizabeth's piece first. What you'll see is this is a shape that was not indigenous to North America prior to European contact. We reference it in our culture as a Rebecca picture, going back to the biblical story of Rebecca going to the well. I wasn't there for that. So now we move this form into Catawba culture, and this is what we have. We have the Rebecca picture that now has the snake added as the handle. If you look at the pieces that are here on the table, small vessel, tri-leg, it was used to keep it up off of coals. It was used as a cooking vessel. This shape is here. It has been around for thousands of years. But when you look at the effigies that are added, there was no reason to do it other than to express oneself artistically. So when we talk about early people and what they came to, once again, if you look at the piece that Elizabeth is holding, what you'll see is she has the shape. She's added the snake, and I know a lot of people have problems with snakes. And we may touch on that, or you may ask that question. I don't know, but the snake doesn't hold the same bad juju that it does in non-indigenous country. So I embrace it. I think there are people who actually find them a little disturbed about that, but I'm okay with that. This is the piece by Georgia Harris. And the reason I actually have this piece is not because my grandmother wanted to gift it to me. It's because the fire god blew out a hole, and my grandmother would never sell any of her work that was not perfect. It was something that was taught to her by her grandmother. So I sort of fall in that same vein. But when you look at this is definitely a cooking vessel. Once again, you have the legs. But this is something I want to bring to your attention. The head shape. Why this head shape? And what I will share with you is pretty remarkable, because in 1763, the chief of the nation at the time was King Hagler. He was killed in an ambush by the Shawnee people. And the only time historically that the Catawba people have memorialized a leader is with this. I cannot tell you what year that they started doing this, but it was definitely between the period of the end of the French and Indian War and as we went into about the middle of the Revolutionary War. So this design has been with this nation for this long, and it's changed shapes through different artists, but it still goes back to that King Hagler head shape, and that is pretty remarkable when you stop and think about it. That we haven't done it with any other leader, but we did it with that individual. So there are mold makers, people who actually make molds to do that head shape. There are artists who freehand that shape. But the mold makers were cherished at one time because not everybody could make a mold. It was a little bit time consuming, and some people just didn't want to put the time in. But for me, when I look at Catawba pottery, I don't know, other than who I am and having Georgia as not only as my grandmother, but as my teacher, instilled in me this love for this primitive art form that has survived for these many years and generations, and we're still doing it today. So that's sort of a short step in for me. So I'm gonna turn it over to Elizabeth now and let her tell you why she's doing this.
Okay. Well, as you can see from my two pieces that I shared, you can definitely see Bill's influence on my pottery, just like you can see George's influence on Chief's pottery, which is a really cool thing to kind of see that passed down. I think a lot of times when you look at different Catawba potters, you can kind of see, certain family lines have similar styles. One thing that I have found really interesting is when I first became really motivated to find a teacher, I took 2 classes through our cultural center, and I had 2 different teachers. One was Keith Brown and one was Caroline Sanders. And it was just very interesting to see, everything goes back to this one art form, but each artist kind of brings their own flair to it. They each had different ways to do certain things. And so that really just piqued my interest. Both of those classes, I think, were about 3 or 4 weekends. And what I knew is that if I really wanted to pursue being able to produce pieces, that I would need to find a teacher. So I thought of a few people that might be willing, and actually Bill was the first person I talked to and asked him if he'd be willing to put in the time to teach me. And so we've been getting together at his studio probably about twice a month for a year and a half plus now. And I've
best case scenario, yeah.
Yeah, I've probably made 7 or 8 pieces now. Yep. Right now, I haven't sold any pieces. I don't feel like I'm ready for that yet, but I have been giving them to my family members as birthday presents. So pretty much every family member has received a piece of pottery from me so far since I started my classes. My grandmother was a potter, but she didn't really practice it very much. She learned in a class that was done in the 1970s. I don't remember the exact year. Do you? 1974?
Somewhere in that time period.
Yeah, so in that time period, they were trying to revive or have more people learn how to make Catawba pottery, and she was part of that class. I think that she had helped her mother and her grandmother some, like most of our tribal citizens did during that time frame. But usually the kids had to do the grunt work, is what I've always been told. I don't know about you, Chief. And so a lot of them, some of them, caught on to it and became potters, but some of them, because they had to do the grunt work, the hard stuff, they kind of shied away from it as they got older. But she did know the basics, and I do have one small piece of hers that I actually found on eBay of all places. So So it was it was something that was done within my family, but no one that was really, I would say, actively doing pottery. So from working with for the tribe and, you know, just seeing the importance of passing down Catawba pottery to the next generations, I felt like I had to follow through, kind of put my time into what we have been preaching to our youth to learn. Chief has done a lot of classes with our teen center and our other children's programs, but we really, there's not a lot of people my age that are actively making pottery. So I just felt like it was something that I needed to do.
Well, and that concludes the session for today. I'm going to, as you can see, I have clay in my hand. So I'm going to do a small vessel as we talk, just so that we can have a conversation as we work. As you can see, mine is nothing more than it's a lot of handwork. I will say that for those of you who joined us and thought today was going to be about watching paint dry, we have something so much more exciting. We're going to watch clay dry. So it takes a little bit longer for clay to dry. So if you want to go get some popcorn or something, then you're good. This right here will be the bottom of the vessel.
Bill, can you move that piece over just a little bit? There we go.
I have a board here that I'm going to be working off of. Also, what you will see is small board. This right here is what they call a workboard, but this is ingenuity. Actually, I have this right now because my grandmother said, you know, Bill, we don't need to just keep doing this stuff on a board. We need something that we can actually make this, or we can look at it a little bit better. So remember the old plastic lazy Susans people used to have on the middle of their table? Well, that was my grandmother's first turntable. And from there, she and I sat down one day and we found these metal discs that have ball bearings, and I made her one and I made me one. So.
And that's my favorite thing to build a piece on, because you can really see it from all angles and try to balance it out. I think it's really good tool while you're learning. I use that quite a bit.
Okay. Coil Method is also what is indigenous people use. We do not use a wheel. We use a slow moving turning disc. I'm trying to minimize wheel in all of this. But Coil Method is not unique to Catawba. Any civilization that had mud and water actually did clay. What they discovered was as they made bigger pieces, instead of pinching them out, if they did coil, they could make them larger. So what you'll see me doing right here is getting the air out of my clay, because one thing you don't want is air, because when you put air in there and it heats up, it has to expand. And when it expands, it blows out, just like it did on my grandmother's piece. So nothing has changed in that time period. And as I say, I'm going to do this rather quickly so you do not get to watch clay dry. But the important thing is just to show that it's a technique that someone figured out and thought, you know, this really works. So why change that which works? So I don't reinvent the wheel. My grandmother did.
And this is why he's doing it, because he's much faster than me, obviously. I can do this, but it just takes me a lot longer, especially to get the continuity across the coils. And that takes time.
Yeah, the first thing you do when you when you start with clay is you want to do, people do this, and they mash it down and they make it. And that's not how you get a coil. How you get a coil is you massage it.
You have to be very gentle with everything, which has been a lesson for me.
Yes, it has.
You have to have a soft touch.
So, any questions at this time? I can't chew gum and walk, but I can roll coils and answer a question.
It looks like we've got quite a few questions from the chat. A lot of questions about the clay and the process, and some of the overlapping questions that are being asked are about how you get the shine on Catawba pottery. And I think what they're really asking is about the burnishing process, because they're asking, are these pots glazed, and how do you get the shine?
I'll tell you what, I'm going to let Elizabeth talk you through this as I work my clay up and talk about the burnishing process. So
yeah, so this is a piece that I've been working on for my sister-in-law's birthday. So if she's out there, she's getting a sneak peek of her piece. And it has a Carolina wren on it, which is something that Bill has done with a lot of his pieces. Again, you're seeing his influence there. So this piece is in the process of being completed, and it's at the point now that it needs to be burnished. So we have several tools that we can use for that. And I know this may be hard to see, but flat river rock is probably one of the main things that people use. This is antelope. What is this?
It's deer antler.
Deer antler, yes, thank you. And so I have several different sizes there as well. So again, I don't know how well you can see, but how you get the shine is really spending time with the river rock or the deer antler, and you just slowly, there's different ways you can do it. You can kind of go in a small circular motion. You can go in just a very quick back and forth motion. And sometimes it depends on the piece and kind of what's needed. You can see kind of in a corner here, you've got to be especially gentle. But how you get that shine is just to very slowly and meticulously go over the whole piece and burnish it. And that creates the shine that you see on the pieces.
That burnishing also seals the pottery so that now you have a sealed surface. And when you do it on the inside, you also seal the inside. So they used it for cooking as well, to do a final touch on the cooking vessels. Once they were fired, they turned them upside down under a smoldering fire, and the smoke went into the chamber here and sealed it. So that was another addition to making it waterproof.
You definitely, as you go through the process, you kind of want to remove any clay dust, I guess you would call it, that comes up. This is also something that you have to do very gently. Again, like I said, having to learn that soft touch. If you bear down too deep, you're going to leave marks in the pottery. I've learned that the hard way. So it's definitely something that you want to do with a light touch, and you want to take your time. I think this is really one of the things that sets apart pottery. Not all potters take as long of a process as I've been taught by Bill to burnish the pieces and really give it that shine. Any other questions?
Another question that's coming up in the chat here is the color of the clay and how the clay is sourced. So we know that the Catawba clay comes from along the Catawba River. We won't ask you to give up any trade secrets, of course, but if you could tell us a little bit about how the clay is sourced and processed and how it gets that wonderful color.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, this clay right here was out of what I refer to as the ancient clay hole. And you're right, I'm not going to tell you where that is. But as I said, Catawbas have been going there for centuries. There was a time my grandmother tells the story of how they would take dugout canoes and go down to the river, paddle across, and get what they needed and come back. Now we drive. It's not quite as exciting, but it works. As far as the clay, you dig it out of the ground. You find clay that where you find deposits, and the less trash in your deposit, the better the clay. So there are a couple deposits out there that people will keep going back to. I like to do a little bit of experimenting and try to find different pockets. But I think that's just me. As far as you take the clay home, it's wet when you bring it out of the ground. You put it someplace, let it dry. There are several different ways to actually process it from there. One is to be able to take the clay and pulverize it as it's dry and it breaks up. And with that, then when you put it in water, it dissolves more quickly. And that's what I do. That's what my grandmother did. Once the clay has soaked for at least a week, you would go there and you would scoop off the debris that had floated to the surface. My grandmother would take hers and let it stay another week. If there needed to be added water to it, she added water to it and she would stir it. When it came time after the end of that 2-week period, she would take her clay. And I always liked this one because most times she did her processing in the summertime and worked her way through, worked her clay pieces in the winter. But what she would do, though, she had and I know that this isn't going to happen to everybody today, but she had an old tire. It was a truck tire. It was about this big, which means that the inside was about this big. So what she would do is she would take a screen and lay it over that tire. Well, let me back up. Before she would place a sheet on that tire while it was on the ground, and then she would lay a window screen, over top of that, pour that through there, and what was trapped in the sheet was now going to become clay. But the beauty of using the tire and pouring it on the ground was the ground was actually good at absorbing the moisture, and you had the sun coming down from the other side. So I literally watched my grandmother in the space of 5 hours make pottery from clay she had just poured up, because it was that hot and that dry. So she was able to go outside, pull the clay off that was malleable at that point and bring it back in. So I'm going to, as I say, this is how you actually take your coil and put it to your disc. There are several ways to do that. One of my favorites is what my grandmother taught me, and you probably can't see this, but I'm going to tell you, well, you can probably see this. Yeah. It is a modern day corn cob. Let me see. I think I had corn during the summertime, so this right here is not that old. I do have a couple of corn cobs that belong to my grandmother that I have kept because I won't use them for that. But this is an excellent tool for actually binding that clay to that bottom piece. We do have modern day tools that do a little bit better job than this. But what I have told the students I have worked with is it's not about getting good quickly. It's about developing a relationship with clay. And that's what I have stressed with with my students, and Elizabeth is getting there with that. She still wants to be the
perfectionist.
I was actually going to go with prima donna, but we'll go with perfectionist. That seems to set better with her than prima donna. So.
It does.
Okay, so that was too harsh.
Probably true, but
okay. Another tool that is that has come along from my grandmother's tools is this lovely fork. And what you do with this lovely fork is you actually score the top of your coil. Once again, water can be your best friend and it can be your enemy. Too much water and your piece will just fall over. Too less and it will not bond together. So that's a sort of a learning process. You sort of just get to where you can feel if it needs more or less water.
And I don't know how many of our tribal potters have tools passed down from a previous generation, but that's one thing that have found to be really cool when I've been able to go to Bill's pottery studio. He has quite a few tools. Of course, he has his own tools, and like he said, there's also modern tools, modern clay tools that are useful as well. But I just think it's really neat that he has that from his grandmother and is able to use some of the same tools, as odd as they may be. An ice cream scoop, the top to a biscuit can, but just the fact that those things were passed down from his grandmother and used by her when she made her pottery is just really cool.
I have stones that belong to Martha Jane, burnishing stones that I have used.
So that's your great grandmother, right?
That's my great.
Great. Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. But
do you know if any other potters have?
You know, what's crazy is when you talk to potters, what you'll hear today is, I don't know what happened to my grandmother's pieces. Now, I was very, very fortunate because my grandmother actually willed me hers. So I got her tin of tools. And with that, with one stipulation, I will concede, if any other of my siblings or my first cousins wished to do clay, I had to share the tools.
But so far that hasn't happened.
Actually, I told them that somebody stole the tools, so but okay,
Smart.
No. That's not really true. It's one I can get away with though. Nobody in my family, other than I have a great niece now, who came to me, I guess about 9 months ago, and she said,
I feel like it was right before COVID.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. And she said, I think I'd like to do this. So I had another student until COVID took that student. Well, ended those classes. It did not take the student. All it did was just ended the classes.
Limited the classes.
Yes.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Well, that was close. Sorry, Kaylee, you're still with us. Okay.
Any other?
Next question.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So we have two questions that I'll combine. Someone asked, what is the first piece that you ever made? And someone else asked, what have you done to add your own voice to the tradition? So maybe if you could each talk about, if you remember the first piece that you ever made, or what it was like being a budding potter, and how through your practice you have lent your own voice to the tradition and the art.
Okay, my first piece I made with my grandmother. And she sat there and she said, okay, She guided my hands. At some point, I had a bowl that was leaning right. She took it out of my hands, corrected it, brought it back, set it in front of me, made me finish doing it. And then she said, okay, I need you to destroy that, mash it. And I said, excuse me? And she said, this is your first piece. Your goal is to not do one piece. Your goal is to get better each time you do a piece. So the thing about clay is it's reusable until you fire it. So Elizabeth said something earlier about there was a time when youngsters were not allowed to make clay because the value was placed on the value of the clay itself. It was labor intensive, and you could barter with it for food and clothing. And sometimes actually people would pay you for it. So it wasn't something that you gave to a child, but they were left to do some of the less meaningful tasks.
Mm-hmm.
But clay was valued. As a matter of fact, my aunt on my grandfather's side, who was taught by my grandmother, used to reference it as gray gold. So
really?
Yeah, so that was the thoughts around the community was, yes, there is value in this, so you didn't just squander it. So my first piece, going back to that, was my grandmother made me destroy it. From there, the next time she said, now remake it. So I remade the piece, and this time, with very little assistance from her, I got something that looked like a bowl. And as I'm sitting there, she says, okay, destroy it.
She made you destroy it again?
So my first piece, probably I did it probably about 3 times, at least 3 times, before my grandmother said, okay, set it aside and let it dry, and then we'll burnish it. So that was my first experience working with my grandmother. My time after that, like I said, I was in my early 20s when I took lessons from my grandmother. As I said, I didn't do anything with it till I was, let's just say, early 50s. So when I sat down and made my first piece without my grandmother, I looked at this thing and I thought, I am so glad my grandmother's not here to see this ugly pot. Because the one thing my grandmother could not understand is, why would you create an ugly piece of pottery?
She would just smash it and start again if
oh,
she
yeah.
thought it was ugly, right?
And she has said many times, I don't know why they kept working on that piece. That piece was so ugly. So.
Well, I've heard similar stories from a lot of our potters of your grandmother's age, that they got their students to smash pottery. And because of those stories, I was always very scared that Chief was going to make me smash my pottery, but he never did. The first piece I made was just a very small bowl. I actually have it in my office here just to remind me of how far I've come in a relatively small amount of time. It's not very good. It's not very smooth. It has some imperfections where you can see, I guess, just, how it was made. It wasn't made at the highest quality. But I think that it's important to kind of know where you started and be able to see your progress, because then you know that you are getting more comfortable with the clay and, just making it your own. So Chief, the second part of that question was, what mark do you think you're making on pottery?
I think in modern time, when I was a student of my grandmother's, I'll just call her Georgia. When I was a student of Georgia's, the thing she did share with me was, Bill, if you're going to do clay, I will ask that you do one thing, and that is that you teach others. So I have done that. I have followed my grandmother's wish. I think as far as my mark, probably the thing that I can say and be 100% on is how strongly I advocate for the continuation of this beautiful art form. Even though it is labor intensive, and there are times that, as I just showed you earlier with my grandmother, the fire god took that piece. The fire god didn't care that my grandmother had spent all that time with it. But it does keep you humble.
Yes, it does. I've had that experience a few times now.
My worst experience with the fire god was I had 10 pieces in varying sizes, and we pit fire. So I was outside and I pit fired, and I didn't get one piece out of 10. I took a picture of that, and I kept that picture somewhere, just as a reminder of, you can do your best work, but it doesn't always reach completion. So
I think for me, for Bill's pottery especially, I think that he's added his own kind of creative flares to it. We have several Catawba potters that I would say are much more what I would call traditionalists. They stick a lot to the traditional shapes, and there's some Catawba potters that feel like that's really the only true Catawba pottery. They give other potters that are maybe a little more creative a little bit of a hard time every now and then. I think Bill can attest to that. I think Bill definitely puts his own kind of creative flair. He's the only potter so far that I've seen that has things like this, like a bird attached, which is a different kind of effigy than a lot of other potters use. He definitely likes to add the snakes, but that's pretty common. The snakes are pretty common.
The snake is pretty common in our culture.
But I just think it's really important. I feel like I haven't really I haven't had the opportunity to really put my own flair on it yet, because I'm still getting comfortable with it and obviously kind of learning the process. And I feel like that's kind of the important first step before I can maybe try something different than what I've been taught. But I just think it's really important for people to understand that, just like with any civilization, artwork changes over time. And so, Catawba pottery isn't just one thing. It's what that particular artist, where he or she lets it take them. And so I just feel like some artists are more creative, some artists are more traditional, and there's space for everybody to be what they feel like Catawba pottery should be.
And going off of what Elizabeth just said, the market also drives the chain. If you look at the pieces that you see on the table here, you'll see that there's a high gloss to them, and that's sort of the demand that's been put on this art form by the public, because their public is now used to high glazed surfaces. So when they see Catawba pottery, my grandmother's piece is less high gloss than the pieces you see here. But that's because there's more time spent on the very, very fine smooth stones and the deer antler to get that high gloss burnish. So if the public was to say, I don't like that's too high, then we would probably, well, I know we would actually concede that and go back and do less burnishing. But the fire is what gives you the colors. I've never been able to control and never wanted to to control the color in my pieces. I know that Elizabeth wishes to say, I wish I could control the color.
It would be nice.
See.
But it is also kind of cool just to see how it turns out as well.
Well, and that's why I said, you know, I can't replicate. So if I'm doing a piece, it is what it is. And either you're going to say, well, can you give me something that has a little more black in it? I can, but it's not going to give you the black that you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even if you made the exact same piece, when you get to the firing part, it could end up looking completely different depending on the coloration that comes out of the fire.
Yes. Next question. This is going great, y'all.
I'm really excited to see all these questions and comments. We did get a comment from Haley Harris Wade, who said, I'll never forget Miss Blanche at the Cultural Center asking me as a child to smash the clay she was working on. It was such a vivid memory of mine. So a lot of people share those same memories. This is actually a question from me as a student of history in the Carolinas, and thinking about the long tradition of pottery with the Catawba Nation. I don't think it can be understated. Obviously, we're talking a lot about ceramics as an art form, but truly this is a technology that was invented here in the Carolinas and Georgia, you know, some 4,000 years ago. And that technology enabled agriculture and large-scale agriculture, large-scale complex societies and growing populations. You couldn't save seeds or keep food storage dry without this technology. And then through the contact period, you know, the trade aspect of what the Catawbas did with Europeans and that relationship that you built through trade with pottery, the role of ceramics as a technology, as an art form, as a trade form, really can't be understated. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about what it means to Catawba culture today to be continuing this tradition that is so long-standing here in the Carolinas.
I'll let Elizabeth start with that one.
I mean, you hear a lot when you study, and I know that there's a lot of, I'm not a historian either. I know that there's a lot of people that know a lot more about the history of Catawba pottery. But I mean, it's very easy to study and see that Catawba pottery was very important, not just for the tribe, but also for the European settlers. I can't remember the exact quote, but I know that there was a quote that some of the women in the Charleston area said that they would only cook out of a Catawba vessel because it was sealed so well and it was very good to cook with. And it was a major source of income through the trade, but through the trade routes, but also even in more modern times, there are stories about Catawba women mostly going to Winthrop University here in Rock Hill and selling their pottery to the students there. And that was a major source of income for those families. And so Catawba pottery has always been very important for the tribe as kind of a lifeline to be able to survive. And luckily the settlers found that it was quality work and that it was something that they wanted to purchase and have. So I think that, you know, of course now it's evolved much more into art than utility, but just the fact to know that we have these clear moments in history that are written down showing the importance of Catawba pottery. You know, we may not have something from 4,000 years ago, but we have, you know, at least a few hundred years of record of why it was important. And so it's just really cool to know that you're a part of that. And I think that one of the things that is really important is making sure that we keep doing it, because you don't, as Chief has said many times, you don't want to be the generation that stops doing pottery and then it isn't here anymore. So it's just very important to find people within the tribe that have the interest to actually put the time in to learn so that it can continue.
And working off of what Elizabeth just said, one thing that is unique to Catawba is that there has never been a generational stop of doing clay. When you go back to the let's just step back 4,000 years, excuse me, when it started, what has happened is there's never been a time that they can find where Catawbas quit doing clay. So historically, we have been doing clay continuously for 4,000 years. So that was something that like I said, I stress with when I teach the youngsters, especially, is okay. Is 4,000 years enough for you? Is it? You want to be the generation that says, "Nah, let it end with me"? And so far, I've yet to get anybody who says, "Okay, Chief, we're going to end this now." Because I think what they get is, well, I hear what you're saying, and I see the value in that. So I think if we can just keep pushing that and having people understand, you know, this is almost like a birthright you give to the next generation. And I think that's what my grandmother was telling me is, if I'm going to teach you, then you have to teach. And I have actually expressed that to Elizabeth and to Kaylee. If I'm going to teach you what I give to you, you'll have to give to others. So going back to another thing that was said earlier, and that is, when you look at family lines in the clay pieces that they create, you can almost, in many ways you can, define what family that piece of clay, that clay vessel came from. And that's pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. As I say, with Georgia, I was fortunate to have some of her pieces to guide me as well. But I also have this creative streak in me that sort of pushes beyond tradition, but yet I keep traditional shape. And from there, I become a little bit more creative.
Well said.
Hey, we're up to 25 people.
Well, someone has also asked about a little bit more about let's see here. We've talked a little bit about the firing process and the firing gods and how we just never know how things are going to survive. Thank you for sharing those stories. One of the questions that people are asking as well is, how do we support this tradition? Where do we purchase Catawba pottery today?
I'll give you an address to my house, and you can drive straight to my house, and I'll live Western York County. I'll come to you. So, no, actually, there are artists on the reservation. You can see, and we have the cultural center on the Catawba reservation. But due to COVID, we're having issues with that. But they do have a website. CatawbaCrafts.com.
Yes.
So if you want to look at CatawbaCrafts.com, you will see different indigenous pieces of art, and there will be some clay on that website.
Excellent.
Usually each year we have a festival in the fall called Yapia Iswa. Of course, this year we're not having it, but that is probably the biggest festival that we have, where we have Catawba artists who sell their crafts. And so I would look for that. It's usually near the first weekend in November. We like to have it during Native American Heritage Month. But that's also a really good opportunity to see a variety of Catawba crafts, and several potters are usually there selling their pottery.
I think we are coming up on the hour. I really can't thank you all enough for being a part of this. The Charlotte Museum of History works to tell the whole story of our region, and we just can't do it without the Catawba Nation. This is part of the history of the land here. wonderful cultural traditions still continuing today, and we are just so honored that you were willing to share this with us as part of this Indigenous Peoples Week celebration. I hope everyone will continue to share your questions with us. We'll share some information about how you can reach us, how you can reach the Catawba Cultural Center. We also hope you will join us tomorrow for tomorrow's program with Dr. Stephen Criswell of the USC Lancaster Native American Studies Center. He's going to explore Catawba folk traditions, and that program will be broadcast live on the museum's Facebook, YouTube, and website at 12 noon. We encourage everyone to stay involved with the Charlotte Museum of History, the Catawba Cultural Center, and all of our partners that are part of this week, and continue to learn about our past so that we can work towards a more perfect union together. So thank you again for being a part of this program. We hope to see you in person sometime soon, and we hope you stay well and stay safe and take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, we're still on. Nicely done, Elizabeth.
Nicely done, Bill.